to Hansard.
Yes, leave granted. Leave is granted.
I
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. We now move to question time, and I call Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer. Will superannuation account holders affected by Labor's new doubling of the super tax be able to withdraw funds that are above the new threshold without penalty?
Good question. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you,
64, actually.
Madam President, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about Labor's changes to superannuation and to the
Very well supported.
to the changes that we announced last week, making a modest adjustment to superannuation tax breaks for earnings on balances above $3 million, a change that won't come into effect until after the next election, meaning that for those people who are in the fortunate position, the 0.5% of people who are in the fortunate position to have super balances over $3 million, the changes will not come into effect for another 3 years, depending, obviously, of where they're up to, what stage they are up to, whether they are below the age where you can withdraw super. That will depend, but there is 3 years before this policy comes into effect, Senator Birmingham. If people want to make arrangements to their affairs before that time comes into effect, depending on where they're at in the super cycle, then that's a decision that obviously individual superannuation account holders will make.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. I asked the Minister, given her answer, will Australians who have not reached preservation age by the time this policy takes effect be able to withdraw excess funds from their superannuation accounts that are above Labor's new threshold without penalty?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister.
Thank you. Well, you didn't say that in your first question. Sorry. If you did, I didn't hear prior to preservation age. Well, there is rules about withdrawing super prior to preservation age, as Senator Birmingham well knows. But this is a very modest change to the superannuation system. 0.5% of superannuation of people will be affected. They have, on average, account balances in the order of $5.8 million, that is good for them, obviously, but we are in charge of having to repair a budget that is in structural deficit of $50 billion a year. That is what you left us. We are making very modest changes to begin the hard work of budget repair. This is a very modest change. It affects a tiny amount of people compared to the changes that you brought in 2016.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The rules around preservation age the minister refers to limit the ability of Australians to be able to access their own funds. How does the minister justify legally preventing Australians from changing their investment profile when the government is changing the taxes on those investments, despite having made promises not to do so immediately before the last election?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister.
Because, as I said, it's a very small amount of Australians who are affected by this change. It's a very modest change. It's still concessional arrangements. Let us not forget this. It is still concessional arrangements for those who are in the fortunate position. Let's remember that the average super balance is in the order of $150,000. So that's the average of the super balance. So for those that are fortunate to have super balances over and above that, there are still concessional tax arrangements available even with this change. We are making this very modest change to superannuation to help repair the budget that is in structural deficit because of the mess that you left it in. You didn't fund things properly. You didn't fund things in an ongoing basis. You ignored pressures coming to the budget, hoping that someone else would fix it, and that is the work that we are currently doing with this modest change.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart.
President, my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Can the minister outline to the Senate the challenges facing the budget following a decade of wasteful spending and economic mismanagement under the former coalition government?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Stewart for the question. We inherited, President.
Please continue, Minister.
We inherited, President, a budget stuck in structural deficit. The Liberals and Nationals were the most wasteful government since Federation. They not only oversaw consecutive budgets riddled with rorts and slush funds, they also failed to deal with the policy challenges and the pressures impacting on the budget, which are now increasing, not decreasing. Those opposite delivered more consecutive deficits than any government since the 1920s. And remember those back in black mugs that were printed just that little bit too soon? Remember that? We remember Senator Hume flashing her back in black mug around. They doubled the deficit before the pandemic hit. They left us with $1 trillion in debt with very little to show for it. And they also propped up their budget numbers with a whole range of terminating measures, funding cliffs and a long list of zombie measures going back to 2016. 2016, that you had those zombie measures there trying to make your budget bottom line look better than it was. We had to spend $4.1 billion in October to resolve some of these legacy issues inherited from the previous government, including providing funding certainty for programs that were underfunded or had expiring funding but were ongoing in nature, such as environmental approval processes. How do you know? They continue on the 1st of July in a new financial year. Information technology programs such as modernising business registers. Again, let's have a look at the total price of that program once it's finalised. And this budget, President, we are continuing to do that. We are continuing to find funding cliffs, adult public dental services, MyGov platform, the My Health record, the high-risk terror offender program, not funded.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can the minister provide an update on the work being done to repair the budget after the mess left behind by the former coalition government?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Yes, indeed. I'll take that interjection from Senator Watt. I am running out of time because there is a list of things here that we are uncovering and we'll continue to work on from October and now into the May budget. But we are looking at how we can limit the growth in spending, especially when inflation is high, how we support modest revenue increases, for example, to support our budget repair, which was the announcement we made last week, and focusing new spending on investments that grow the capacity of the economy, like the National Reconstruction Fund, which the Coalition are opposed to manufacturing jobs, opposed to jobs in the region, opposed to Australia getting their fair share of support from a government for those important industries that we're going to rely on in years to come. The October budget also included savings, and we will continue to look at sensible savings areas where we can as we commit to the ongoing role of budget repair.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for outlining the repair responses that are underway. Can you please update the Senate on why budget repair is crucial to supporting the Australian economy and individuals and businesses?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister.
Thank you. Well, we must improve the state of our budget. We need to make those responsible decisions that will ensure the budget is able to withstand and respond to future shocks when they come, and they will come. But we have to make room in the budget to repair the mess that we inherited, and we also have to make room for sensible spending for those areas where we're seeing increased pressure, for Medicare, for hospitals, for aged care, for the NDIS, for other social services, for defence and national security, all of these areas where the pressures on the budget are increasing, they're accelerating, they're not decreasing, and our budget has to be in a position where we are able to deal with that. So we will go through and deal with the legacy of poor budgeting, the budget vandals that we saw opposite. We will fix up those areas where we can, and we will make room for Australians' priorities in those areas I've just outlined.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Madam President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, how will the government's new doubling of the super tax treat unrealised capital gains?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister.
Thank you. And I I am surprised that those opposite have decided to oppose this modest increase or a reduction in tax concessions. A modest $2 billion. I know you'd like to flag it as something other than it is, but 0.5% of Australians who are fortunate enough to have balances over $3 million will pay still a concessional rate of tax at 30% on their earnings in a year, and it will raise $2 billion when fully operational in 3 years' time after we've had another election. But on the question, thank you, Senator Scarr, for shouting across the chamber. The simplest, least-cost approach is to apply the tax on the growth of an individual's balance over the year. This approach, recommended by Treasury, includes assessing unrealised capital gains. It applies prospectively. Alternate approaches would be very costly for super funds, which would come at the expense of members, not just all members, not just those with high balances. Trustees already calculate the value of their fund each year and submit to the tax office, which will enable the ATO to determine liability. We believe this approach strikes the right balance between simplicity and ensuring that the tax can be applied across the system to improve the sustainability of this system. And see, this is what's different between when you were in government and we are now in government. As the responsible economic and fiscal managers of this budget, you went after robo-debt. You went after people with nothing. You went after people who didn't even owe you money. That's what you did. That was the approach. You knew it was illegal. You went after them. You went after them. They didn't even owe you money. This is a modest change to 0.5% of Australians who have a high $3 million.
Senator Scarr, I haven't called you yet, Senator Hume. Interjections are disorderly, and continuing to repeat them and yelling out across the chamber and from the back of the chamber is incredibly disorderly. Senator Hume.
Minister, how will the government's new doubling of the super tax apply to a self-funded retiree in the drawdown phase with a self-managed super fund that owns a commercial property that was valued at $2.5 million in 2024-25 and then valued at $3.1 million in 25-26, but that received a commercial rent of $80,000 also in that year?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I might take the detail of that question on notice. Well, I mean, if you're serious about an answer on that, I can take. If you're serious about getting an answer on that, I mean, if I'm going to come in here and give individual superannuation advice to individual accounts that are given to me, that's where we're going. It is a modest change. The tax will be paid on earnings in a year. It will be taxed on earnings in a year. The tax office will undertake those assessments as they currently do. And as Senator Hume knows—
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Can I just clarify that answer, please, Madam President?
Senator Hume, why are you on your feet? Do you have a point of order?
Point of order. I'd just like a clarification from the minister.
That's not a point of order. Thank you, Senator Hume.
I don't understand.
Senator Hume, the minister— Senator Hume, this is not a— Please resume your seat. Order on my right. When senators get to their feet to ask a point of order and I rule it either in order or out of order, that is the end of the matter. It's not an option to continue to argue with me. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. Well, I've taken the substantive question on notice because of the detail of the question, and I'm not here to give individual superannuation advice. Well, I'm not. I mean, you've given me a cameo. I've taken that on notice. I will come back to you. I will come back to you with an answer on it. There are liquidity requirements for those in
Thank you,
SMSFs.
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Can the minister point to any other example of unrealised capital gains being used in the Commonwealth tax system or indeed in any other jurisdiction? And can you rule out applying taxes to unrealised capital gains elsewhere in the tax system, such as onto the family home or to any other assets currently subject to capital gains tax?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister.
Thank you. Well, we've made clear what the change is. We've been upfront with the Australian people about what that change is, and it relates to high-income superannuation accounts with more than $3 million in it. That is the government's announcement. So don't try and run your fear campaign, your scare campaign, saying it's everything other than it is. Saying it is everything other than it is. The Prime Minister has made it clear what the changes are and the limit to those changes. That was the policy that we announced last year. But it is last week, sorry. But it is a
Minister, please resume your seat. Order on my left and right. Thank you. Minister, please continue.
This is the hill you're going to die on after you pursued thousands of Australians for robo-debt. That is how you tried to repair the budget. That is the hill you're going to die on, is this, while you are the party of robo-debt and those vulnerable Australians that you harass.
Order. Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Order on my left. Senator Waters.
Very much, President. My question is to the Leader of the Government representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Today a report was released by Reputex, the modellers who modelled the Labor Party's climate policy for their election. Their report forecasts 56 million tonnes of pollution from just 13 new coal and gas projects. That's an 11% increase on Australia's current emissions. Can you guarantee that the safeguard mechanism will see actual pollution from coal and gas go down, not up?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Waters for her question. And the government has put forward a safeguard mechanism, the purpose of which is to provide a predictable and orderly pathway to net zero by 2050 for the 215 biggest emitters in our economy. And I would make the point, and I understand this is an issue of negotiation and discussion, but this is the only chance that the parliament will have to reduce emissions from all big emitters. Now, the safeguard changes are expected to reduce 250 million tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions to 2030. That is the equivalent of taking 2/3 of Australia's cars off the roads. I think that the proposition in the question seems to suggest or imply this is not the way we should go about reducing our emissions. That may be the Greens' view. We don't share it. We see benefit. We see benefit in a predictable pathway to actually deliver the 2030 and 2050 targets. And in government,
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Waters.
Yes, reluctantly, point of order on relevance. I specifically asked whether actual pollution from coal and gas would go up or down under the safeguard mechanism.
There was also a number of other there was context before that, and I do believe that the minister's being relevant, but I'll continue to listen carefully. Minister, please continue.
Well, I understand that the Greens political party are more interested in particular sectors of the economy and targeting them. We believe that an economy-wide approach based on who are the largest emitters with a predictable pathway to achieving the targets. Senator Whish-Wilson, would you like to stand up and give a speech?
Senator Whish-Wilson, please come to order. Minister, please continue.
If he wants to ask and answer his own questions, he's got opportunities to do that, but I'm trying to answer.
Senator Whish-Wilson, I've just called you to order and I have the minister on her feet. Minister, please continue.
Leader, apparently, too. No, I agree with you. He can't. I agree. The point we make is that an economy-wide predictable pathway is the lowest cost way.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks very much, President. These new coal and gas projects could force industries that can actually adapt and survive in a net zero world, like cement, steel and aluminium, to have to cut more pollution by almost double. Why is your climate policy pushing the costs of new coal and gas onto everyone else?
Good question.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister.
I don't accept the characterisation. This is a mechanism which is about making sure the largest emitters have a pathway to contribute to net zero by 2050. And I know that there are those who would like governments to pick and choose sectors in terms of making a contribution. I know that there's a particular political views that the Greens political party have on these issues. We think the best approach is to ensure that the market can see a predictable pathway to achieving these reductions, because it's all very well to talk about targets, but the most important thing is to have policy mechanisms which actually—
Order. Senator Whish-Wilson, I've just called you to order. Minister, please continue. Minister Wong, I've called you back to continue answering the question if you have anything further to add.
The point I'm making is we want a mechanism that actually ensures these targets are delivered, because there's no point in talking about action on climate change if we can't deliver it. And we are determined to deliver it, something that this country has not been able to do because of the attitude of those opposite for too many years.
The time has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. These 13 new coal and gas projects would see coal and gas pollution rise in the critical decade for climate action. And there is another 100 new proposals for coal and gas in the pipeline. Why does Labor want to open more coal and gas in the middle of a climate crisis?
Minister.
As I explained, the safeguard mechanism will target 205 million tonnes of net emissions reductions to 2030 overall through the safeguard. It is correct. We are not looking to pick one sector over another. If you emit in excess of 100,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year, you will be covered. So it's agnostic in the sense of where the emissions occur, other than to say if you're a big emitter, you should have a pathway to reducing your emissions. Now, I would have thought that those at the end of the chamber might actually think it's a good thing to get those industries and individual firms who are emitting a very large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to reduce their emissions so we can all meet the net zero target that everybody, with some exceptions, that most of this chamber have signed up to.
Thank you. Senator Sterle. Order. Senator Sterle.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister, representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. Can the Minister update the Senate on the government's plans to ensure that Australia adds value to our critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese and rare earths that we mine in that fantastic part of the nation, WA, and develops a domestic battery manufacturing capability? Minister, what are the opportunities for Australia from developing a domestic industry?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Sterle for that very insightful question, and I know for his support of the mining industry generally in Western Australia, but in particular this area of critical minerals. Of course, Cabinet was up your way last week at Port Hedland. First time ever a Cabinet been into that part of beautiful Western Australia. But as senators are no doubt aware, Australia is rich in a number of the critical minerals on which the renewable energy economy will be based. We're very good at extracting minerals, but we've not always been good at capturing their true value. And that's what this government is trying to change, Senator Sterle. If we look at lithium batteries, the global market for minerals will grow from a current $2 billion to $11 billion by 2035. But if we take one more step up the value chain and refine those minerals, that market grows from $2 billion to $44 billion, some 22 times larger. Then, if we take it all the way to manufacturing the battery cells, that market, listen to this, Senator Sterle, that market will grow from $31 billion to $387 billion. I'll repeat that for you, Senator Watt. That market will grow from $31 billion to $387 billion. And battery pack assembly will then grow. Battery pack assembly, remember this is the mob over here who closed down Holden's. Battery pack assembly will grow from $156 billion to $1.1 trillion. Madam President, if we mine it here, we should make it here.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I'm absolutely in awe, Minister. Other than our access to critical minerals, what other advantage does Australia have when it comes to developing a domestic battery industry?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Sterle again for his extremely insightful question once again. The resources that Australia has been blessed with are human as well as mineral. Across Australia, there are scientists, researchers, business leaders who are leading the world when it comes to battery technology. From the Future Battery Industry CRC at Curtin University to the National Battery Testing Centre at QUT. We're at the cutting edge of this technology. Modern batteries are built not just on smart chemistry, but smart technology as well, and this is a vital capacity that we must foster, and your state of Western Australia is leading the way in that regard.
Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
What is the government doing, Minister, to make sure that we can take advantage of these opportunities and provide jobs in our regions and in our suburbs?
Minister Farrell.
Well, I couldn't agree more. That is an extremely insightful question, and I have an answer for you, Senator Sterle. And the National Battery Strategy is our government's plan to build a battery manufacturing industry. We're not closing down industries like you did with Holden's. We're building it up. This strategy will ensure that we capture the true value of our natural resources and put our international capital to work delivering products that will be in high demand right around the world and support the global transition to net zero. If we mine here, we should make it here, because that will deliver high-skill, high-wage jobs, not only in the cities but particularly in the regions and the suburbs right around Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. In February Senate estimates hearings, Adjunct Professor Skerritt, Deputy Secretary Health Products Regulation Group, made the following statement, and I quote, "There is only one regulator in the world, the US FDA, that actually looks at individual patient data. The rest of the regulators, like us, take statistically validated analyses of patient data. If there are issues with the individual patient data, the FDA will raise those issues. We do not get individual patient data." End of quote. In estimates hearings on the 10th of November 2022, Professor Skerritt said, quote, "We did check the Phase 2 and Phase 3 clinical trial data from Pfizer." Minister, please confirm that the TGA simply checked what Pfizer and the FDA sent to them without checking that back to the source material, patient records, meaning they took Pfizer's word for it.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Roberts for his question. And I was there at, I think, both of those hearings with Professor Skerritt, who has since retired from that role, and I just take this opportunity to acknowledge his contribution, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic and the role of the TGA. On the substantive part of your question, Senator Roberts, I will go back because I obviously wasn't in the position I'm in now when those comments were made about what was done with the Phase 1 and Phase 2 trials and the data that was available. But my understanding of the TGA process is that they don't just necessarily look at one set of data. They are looking at a whole range of data as they're making approvals for particular vaccines. But I will come back and if I have anything further to add on that. I would also say that it's very clear that the vaccination program, the rollout of the vaccination program has saved lives, and it has, particularly for those who are vulnerable to COVID-19, reduced the chance that they would pass away or have very severe disease from COVID-19. And that data is well and truly established and evidence-based, and you can see that in the hospitalisations data and other data that's collected about the impact of the vaccination program. So the vaccine program has been very successful, and we're very fortunate to have been in a position, I think, to have all been vaccinated against this virus over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, can you assure the Senate that the US FDA did actually check the Pfizer analysis of patient data back to the actual patient data?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I don't think I'm in a position, or the government's in a position, to say what the FDA did or didn't do. I can certainly see if there's any further information I can provide to the senator. I acknowledge his ongoing interest in this area, and if there are further advice I can provide to assure you that very strong and thorough and rigorous processes were followed before the TGA approved any of the vaccines that were used to vaccinate against COVID-19.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
If that is the case, Minister, why then does that same data, when independent leading virologists examine it properly in a peer-reviewed published paper, show the 400,000 patient records actually prove the vaccine was unsafe and should not have been approved? I ask you again, Minister, did our bureaucrats approve a dangerous product because they trusted Pfizer, and in so doing they failed to act in Australia's best interests?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, no, I don't think that's a correct assertion to put, and I do have, and I would expect that most senators in this place would have complete and total faith in the processes used by the TGA when they were going through the approvals for the vaccine against COVID-19. I know there are some in this place, and I've certainly sat in estimates listening to the questions that a number of senators have asked that have a different view, but I would say the overwhelming view of senators in this place is that the TGA undertook rigorous examination in a compressed timeframe because of the situation we were facing. And I think it's easy to forget that we were facing a pandemic where it was predicted that we would see significant loss of life if we were not able to protect citizens. And we've been, again, very fortunate to have relied on the science to have rolled out the vaccine, and the data is very clear around the impact the vaccines had on reducing serious disease and death from COVID-19.
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Askew.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Given Labor's new doubling of the super tax will see earnings in some superannuation accounts paying twice the tax rate as currently applies, will there be any changes to the tax rates applied to those accounts when they are distributed following an account holder's death?
Good question. Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I welcome the opportunity to talk about the government's policy, which, well, I will answer the question, so hold your horses. No, I'm not wasting time here. It's an important question, and I'm making sure that I get the answer exactly correct for you. Well, I do my homework, Senator Scarr. I do my homework, but I welcome the opportunity to talk about this very modest change that we are making to the arrangements for superannuation for those on higher incomes, $3 million or more, raising a modest $2 billion once fully operational in 3 years' time. And I would make the point that those opposite have failed to understand is that at the moment the budget is in structural deficit. We are borrowing to keep services going, okay? And we are saying that it's not fair to borrow more.
Please resume your seat. Senator Askew.
Just a point of relevance, point of order on relevance. I did ask about the specifically in the case of death.
Thank you. I'll direct the Minister to the question.
Thank you. But just to finish that point, and I will come to the issue that was raised by Senator Askew, is that Senator Askew and those opposite, the no-alition, are arguing that others with much lower superannuation balances should be paying the interest on the debt that we are borrowing to keep the services of government going, rather than make this modest change for those that are fortunate enough to have $3 million and more in their accounts, an average of $5.8 million. Generally, death benefits are able to be withdrawn from the superannuation system. Members will have this option so they do not face additional tax.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew, first supplementary.
Thank you. Will Labor's new doubling of the super tax mean that a widow or widower would be penalised with a higher tax rate if the retention of their late spouse's superannuation within superannuation saw their savings now exceed Labor's new and unindexed threshold?
Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister.
The death benefit will not count as earnings in the year that it is received by the surviving spouse.
Senator Askew, second supplementary.
Okay. So how is the application on deceased estates of Labor's new doubling of the super tax, which Mr Albanese promised not to do, anything other than a creeping march towards new forms of death duties that penalise Australians at their most vulnerable time?
Order. 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 Order across the chamber. I have the minister on her feet, waiting to answer the order on my right. Order. Senator Wong. Minister.
Thank you. Classic example there of not being able to amend your final question based on the answers to the first two. I would say, for those that are arguing to maintain these arrangements, these concessional arrangements, which will remain concessional, for the 0.5% who are fortunate enough to have more than $3 million in their superannuation account to contribute, or to have less concessional arrangements in place that contributes to budget repair. And that is your core group now, the 0.5% who are in that. And when we have a look, just remember those words. Remember the words of Robodebt. We will find you. We will track you down, and you will have to repay those debts, and you may end up in prison. You may end up in prison. That is the approach you took to budget repair. That is the approach.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rice.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on the 21st of February, the Fair Work Commission said that the 15% increase for aged care workers should be paid in full from the 1st of July 2023. Minister, will the Commonwealth commit to funding that 15% increase in full from the 1st of July 2023, and will that include on-costs such as funding for leave and superannuation?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister.
The government has said that we will fund that aged care case, and I think again, and thank you, Senator Rice, for the opportunity to again contrast the approach that we're taking as in government as opposed to them when they were in, where they pursued vulnerable low-income Australians and threatened them with prison for an illegal scheme that they knew was illegal.
That's right. They doubled down.
That is the approach. We are making room in our budget to fund priorities like aged care wages. We had asked for a phased-in approach, just again to smooth our budget situation because of the impact. It's the cost to the budget is in a multi-billion dollars. We've made some provision for that. We'll have a look at how much we have to adjust that for the budget going forward. But yes, we have said we will fully fund it because we value the work of aged care workers. We understand they are underpaid, and unlike those opposite whose deliberate design feature of their economic architecture was keeping wages suppressed, we do believe that those on low wages, like aged care and other workers, deserve the support of their government, and you will see a significant commitment in this budget to go to fund the costs of that case.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Thanks, Minister. And look, I just want clarification that when you say you will fully fund it, you are now talking about fully funding it in that first financial year, not spreading it out over 2 financial years as originally proposed. I mean, that's good news, so I'm wondering whether you would be actually willing to go further, because the Health Services Union, of course, had called for a 25% increase in wages. And as we know, the aged care workforce is really low paid. Why would the government continue with the Stage 3 tax cuts rather than fund the full amount that aged care workers really need?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I thank Senator Rice for the question. There is a further stage to the Fair Work Commission case. This is, I think, the culmination of stages 1 and 2 on the aged care case that has come up with this. The initial increase of 15%, that was the stage 1 decision. Stage 2 has come back saying that the Commission thinks it should be paid on the 1st of July and to include some other workers in that arrangement. And now there's a subsequent process to consider the rest of the case. I think you can see from the commitments we've made to date and the room that I'm currently trying to find in the budget to fund this, while against these crazy attacks from the opposition who prefer a head-in-their-sand approach to funding aged care things, like I don't fund them or argue against them. We are making the difficult decisions to be able to fund aged care workers appropriately.
Senator Rice, second supplementary.
Thank you. Thanks, Minister. I mean, the Royal Commission estimated that implementing their recommendations in full would cost on the order of $10 billion a year annually, and the latest official figures show that aged care providers are operating at an average loss of $28 per resident per day. So in terms of finding room in the budget, abandoning the Stage 3 tax cuts would free up an extra $25 billion per year on average. So will the government find room in the budget by abandoning the Scott Morrison tax cut?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, in answer to that question, our policy on those tax cuts haven't changed. We are focused on making sure multinationals can pay their fair share of tax, and of course we'll look to legislate the arrangements for the superannuation changes that we announced last week. So that they are the areas that we have been focused on. But we are also going through the budget line by line. It is my job and the Treasurer's job and the ERC's job to look at ways that we can make room for all of the priorities and for all of the services that the Australian people value. We know they value aged care, we know they value Medicare, we know they value hospital care, and you know, that is the difficult job, and it requires at times some difficult decisions, but we are responsible, we are fiscally responsible, we are dealing with the decade of budget vandalism that went on from those opposite, and we are making those difficult decisions.
Senator Grogan.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the Albanese government is delivering a better future for all Australians after a decade of failed policies?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister.
Thank you very much to Senator Grogan from my own wonderful state that I haven't got to see in a little while, of South Australia. I appreciate the question, and I'm very pleased to talk to the Senate about what this government is seeking to do after a decade of division, of denial, of waste and rot, secret ministries and deliberate neglect, which went so well, about what the Albanese government is delivering. This government, since the election, has supported an increase in the minimum wage and secured a pay rise for aged care workers. And now I just want to remind everybody, after the many questions which Senator Gallagher has answered so well, that just recall that those opposite desperately opposed $1 per hour for the lowest paid workers in Australia, but they are prepared to go to the wall. Over 0.5% of people in Australia who have $3 million in their superannuation accounts. And Australians will look at that and they will understand which side of this chamber is actually about families and working people, which side of this chamber is actually about a better future for all Australians, and which side are too busy focusing on scare campaigns such as some of the pathetic attempts of those opposite. This government has made childcare cheaper, we've made medicines cheaper, we've created 180,000 new fee-free TAFE places, we've delivered 20,000 university places, established 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave. The government is expanding paid parental leave. Government is acting to make workplaces safe from sexual harassment with the passage of the Respect at Work bill. We've established Jobs and Skills Australia. We've passed a historic climate change bill and updated our climate targets. We are repairing our international relations and making Australia stronger and more influential in the world. We've expanded the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card and made it easier for pensioners to earn more without losing their pension. We've invested in affordable housing and we've delivered the first home buyers guarantee.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. That's an impressive list of items that you've run through there, and it's very pleasing to see. I wonder if you could now tell us how these achievements are going to ease the cost of living for Australians.
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Well, this government and the senators on this side understand that it's important that government actually put in place measures to help address the cost of living challenges created under the Liberals and the Nationals. And let's just remember that those opposite presided over increases to out-of-pocket childcare costs of 47%. Let's remember those opposite who wanted to introduce a GP tax, tried to increase the cost of medicines by $5, opposed, never increased the number of paid parental leave weeks, said no to social and affordable housing, including for women and children, and, as I said before, most importantly, opposed $1 an hour. Unbelievable. Increase to the minimum wage for the lowest paid in our country. Everyone will remember the way in which those opposite refused to back that wage increase and which leader was prepared to stand up and say, I back it.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you very much. I wonder if you could now step out for us how the Albanese government will continue to deliver for Australians this year.
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Grogan, for the second supplementary. Well, we know we can't fix a decade of neglect, incompetence and bad policies overnight, but we will keep working to deliver on our commitments to provide greater economic security, relief for families, security in energy, manufacturing, jobs and wages. And those opposite, as much as they yell, everyone will remember who is the party that voted against energy price relief. Yeah. Who is the party that doesn't want to support manufacturing in this country? The reality is those opposite have no plan to address cost of living, no plan to address the future. And what we've seen in this question time already is that they have not learned from a decade of division and pathetic scare campaigns. But if they think that that is what Australians are after now, I have a message to them. We are about building a better future for Australians, and that's what Australians want.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senators, when you are called to order, specifically when I call you by name, I expect you to stop interjecting. Senator Bragg.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President, for that. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Watt. And my question is, how will the new super tax apply to defined benefit schemes?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister.
Thank you. From the senator that so positive about super, who has a lifelong interest in super. Yeah, I will. And we're doing it exactly the same way that you did it when you announced your 2016 changes. There are a couple of areas that we need to consult upon further, which we will do. But there isn't, because of the nature of defined benefit, that they will be included in the scheme, and we announced that when we announced the measure, and our announcement accounted for that. It was clear, and again in the announcement by the Treasurer, that we would consult with the sector, which is the same process, because I remember it when you introduced it in your 2016-2017 changes, which of course went much further than the changes that we are talking about today. So we expect that the changes they definitely will cover defined benefit scheme, and there are a couple of areas that we are going to consult on. And we want some industry advice on. As people know, that the defined benefit schemes work differently to accumulation schemes, and they are complex. And so there is some further consultations we would like to do, as the Morrison government did back in 2016-2017.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bragg, first supplementary.
Thanks very much for that, Minister. Can you guarantee that there will be equitable treatment between the ordinary superannuation schemes and the generous defined benefit schemes?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, we are including them in the under the same arrangements. So yes, they will be treated equitably. And as I said, there are two areas where we will like to consult industry on: the valuation of a defined benefit scheme for the purposes of assessing a person's superannuation balance against the $3 million threshold, and approach to taxing the equivalent of earnings in relation to balances above $3 million. We will consult closely with funds that have defined benefit schemes on this. This is exactly the same arrangements that you put in place when you lowered the 300,000 Division 293 threshold to 250,000. When you made those changes, which weren't indexed, by the way, just throw that in. When you put those arrangements in place, you also undertook a process around defined benefit scheme. We are doing exactly the same thing.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bragg, second supplementary.
Thanks very much. Minister, did the 5 cabinet ministers, including the Prime Minister, who will have access to generous defined benefit schemes, declare their personal interest before or during the cabinet deliberation on Labor's new doubling of the super tax?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister.
The cabinet handbook was followed, and I can assure the senator we are an orderly, adult, responsible government. We take matters of integrity and honesty very seriously. We don't introduce illegal schemes like robo-debt, which pursued vulnerable people in the name of budget repair. Remember that? It was going to raise $4 billion and repair the budget. What you didn't say was it's illegal. We're going to hound vulnerable people that don't owe us money. We're going to threaten to send them to jail. We're going to threaten to send them to jail. That's what happened over here. We are not that type of government. All arrangements, as set out in the Cabinet Handbook, including declarations of relevant conflicts, are followed in accordance with those arrangements.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. Last February, New South Wales and Queensland faced devastating flooding in one of the costliest and most devastating global natural disasters of 2022. As we pass the one-year anniversary, can the Minister please update the Senate on what support has been provided to these very important communities?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sheldon, for your ongoing work as the government's disaster envoy, as well envoy for disaster recovery, supporting me and all flood victims in the ongoing task of recovery. I'd of course like to acknowledge again that this one-year anniversary has been a very difficult time for many Australians. The flooding event that we saw in February 2022 devastated communities across the east coast of Australia, and it has been and will be a long road towards recovery. As a government, we've been working very hard, along with those affected communities in New South Wales and Queensland, to ensure that they are able to not just recover from those floods back in February last year, but to build back in a more resilient way. Financial recovery that's now been provided totals in the billions of dollars for a range of programs across a range of floods last year, and those programs assist primary producers, small businesses, homeowners, charities, landlords, councils and many others. In the Northern Rivers of New South Wales alone, more than $1 billion has been provided jointly with the New South Wales Government in support payments directly to residents, but we know that there's a long way yet to go. While the Albanese government is focused on recovery, we're also focused on being better prepared for future disasters. That's why we've rolled out resilience and betterment projects in disaster-prone regions, passed legislation and opened applications for our flagship Disaster Ready Fund, unified the two arms of federal emergency management to create a new National Emergency Management Agency, provided pathways out of harm's way for people through investment in voluntary home buybacks and taking action on future floodplain builds. We've invested in Disaster Relief Australia to provide recovery and clean-up support after disasters. We've commissioned an independent review into national disaster funding arrangements to ensure funding is hitting the right areas. We've invested in flood research and many other things. The Albanese government knows that the job is not over and will continue to support communities impacted by natural disasters.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
In my home state of New South Wales, the Northern Rivers was particularly hard hit. What is the Albanese government doing to ensure the Northern Rivers are being prepared for the future flooding?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you again, Senator Sheldon. The 2022 February floods were the worst floods the Northern Rivers has ever seen, and I know Senator McAllister has also spent a significant amount of time there, hailing from the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. Last week I was back in Lismore with local state member Janelle Saffin, Mayor Steve Krieg, Senator Sheldon, Senator McKenzie and the federal member Mr Hogan to commemorate the one-year anniversary and reflect on the past 12 months. I was honoured to meet and thank locals in the Tinny Army as they were presented with medals for their courageous efforts helping to rescue strangers trapped by floodwaters. Recently, I announced $50 million of flood resilience projects to be delivered under Tranche 1 of the Northern Rivers Recovery and Resilience Program, fully funded by the Albanese government. This includes things like road raising, flood pumps, drains and community resilience projects. And the remaining $100 million of projects will be announced within the next 6 months, but we know that more support will be needed. We're also cost-sharing two major resilience programs, including the Resilient Homes Program and the Regional Roads and Transport Recovery Package.
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Right now, communities in the Northern Territory are facing flooding. Can the minister please provide an update on what support is being provided to assist these important communities?
Minister.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon, for the question. The Albanese government has acted swiftly to support the Northern Territory through multiple dangerous weather events already this year. We were there after Tropical Cyclone Ellie, and we're there again now. On Wednesday evening last week, I approved a request for Australian Defence Force support from the Northern Territory government, and that support includes 3 aircraft to assist with the evacuation of residents from remote Indigenous communities. I'd like to thank the personnel involved for their proactive and fast action. I understand that around 570 people are currently residing in Howard Springs, having been evacuated from those communities. We know there's heavy rainfall forecast in these communities for the next week, and so it may be some time before impact assessments can be undertaken and people return to their communities. A liaison officer from the National Emergency Management Agency is on the ground, and we remain in close contact with the Northern Territory government, and that's in addition to Services Australia personnel being based out of Howard Springs. We'll continue to work with the Northern Territory government to ensure people get.
Madam President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Will an increasing number of Australians be subjected to Labor's new doubling of the super tax due to the government's refusal to index its new threshold?
Minister.
Thank you, President. I welcome the question on the government's modest change to the superannuation arrangements that we announced last week.
Fighting for the 0.5%.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, because it is important that we explain it. And the $3 million threshold strikes the right balance between incentives to save for retirement and strengthening the super system by making it more sustainable over time. I think the evidence is from the superannuation sector themselves that ASFA estimates for a comfortable retirement at 67 you need $545,000 if you're a single person and $640,000 if you are a couple. A $3 million balance will be more than sufficient for an adequate retirement for most people for many years to come. And many parts of the tax system aren't indexed, for example personal income tax levels, and as I said, the former government lowered the contribution tax threshold Division 293 without indexation.
Thank you. Senator Canavan.
Point of order on relevance. It was a very simple question about indexing the threshold. Minister hasn't got anywhere near that topic after a minute.
Senator Wong.
As the senator got to his feet to raise the point of order, the minister was in fact talking about precisely that.
Thank
so
you,
I think there is
Minister
no point
Wong.
of order.
The senator has gone to the issue of your question, Senator Canavan, and I'll continue to listen carefully. Minister.
Thank you, President. In 30 years, Treasury projects that roughly only the top 10% of earners will retire with superannuation balances of around $3 million or more. In 30 years, in 30 years' time, that is the estimation of Treasury, and I would say that this is
Order.
a modest change
Order.
to 0.5% of people that are coming in. Of the 80,000 affected, the average balance is $5.8 million. And I would say, again, this is a modest change we are making in response to having to deal with the budget repair that is required from the economic vandalism of your decade in government.
Senator Canavan, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Given the government obviously has done modelling, why didn't you tell the Australian people last week that in fact 10% of Australians could be affected by your change, not the modest 0.5% you're telling lies about today?
Minister.
In 30 years' time, Senator Canavan.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. 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 Thank you, Senator Ayres. When I call order, that's what I expect. The same on my left, Senator Mackenzie. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. As I answered the question earlier, many parts of the taxation system aren't indexed. The income tax thresholds aren't indexed. The Division 293 threshold, which you set, which affected a lot more people, isn't indexed. Now, we are being very upfront. About the policy that we took, that we announced last week. We are being very clear about it. It affects a very small amount of people in this country. 18 million people are unaffected. Listen to it. It raises a very modest amount by tightening a concession that remains concessional for those who are fortunate enough to have $3 million. And I would say this to you. The average Australian has $150,000 in their superannuation
Minister.
account.
The time
so how
for
about
answering
you
this
think
question
about them
has expired. Thank you, Senator Hume. I have Senator Canavan on his feet. Second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Given the government has revealed this secret modelling today, how much extra tax on average will those 10% of Australians pay over their lifetime because of your doubling of the super tax?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister.
It's a concessional rate of tax. Let's not forget this, that for those fortunate to have $3 million or more in their superannuation account, mindful of the fact that the estimates are you need in the order of 500 to 600,000 for a decent retirement, and mindful of the fact that average Australians have 150,000 in their super. How about you have the same level of concern for them? How about you have the same level of concern for them as you are feigning at this point in time?
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator, I've got Senator Canavan on his. Well, I need to hear Senator Wong. Please resume your seat. I need to hear the senator first.
Whoa!
Order.
You're doing a great job.
Just a moment. Order. Order on my left. Order on my left. Order on my left. I have Senator Birmingham on his feet. Senator Birmingham.
President, on a point of order, and in defence of your position as President, Senator Wong is the first in this chamber to ask for respect to be shown to you as chair. You said, while Senator Wong was attempting to make her statement, that you had to give the call to Senator Canavan because he was on his feet with a point of order first, and yet Senator Wong chose to ignore what you had said, President, and move ahead with her motion. I ask you to call the point of order, please, President.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong.
Madam President, I'm in your hands. I thought you were calling me. Order!
Order! Order! Order!
I thought you were calling me because of the precedence issue, and I understood that Senator Gallagher had finished, so that he is not entitled, Senator Canavan is not entitled to take a point of order after the minister has finished.
Senator Wong, I saw, I'm not sure whether the minister had finished, but I did see Senator Canavan on his feet. I did go to him and then you stood, but I will seek advice on where we're up to. Senator Canavan, I am going to go to your point of order.
Okay. So the point of order was on relevance. The question only went to the average extra tax paid for by this secret modelling that Labor has done, and in the 36 seconds the minister was speaking, there was not even an attempt to answer that question.
Thank you, Senator Canavan. The minister has been expansive in her answers, and I believe she was being relevant. Senator Wong. Yeah.
I ask that further questions be placed on notice.